Good evening. Hello. I'm Steve Pearson. I'm the editor-in-chief of the West Virginia Independent Observer newspaper. And this is our first forum panel discussion that we're holding. And tonight's topic is on growth in and around Shepherdstown. And this is a topic that the Observer has been following for the past 4 years. And over that time, since 2020, after about a decade of flat growth in Jefferson County, residential growth, housing starts have been doubling every year. So if 250 houses or dwelling units were being built every year for the decade leading up to 2020, in 2024, the county's chief engineer is predicting over 1,600 housing starts this year. So quite a significant increase. And it's just a timely discussion to have because in the next couple of weeks, there'll be a couple of meetings, both for Shepherdstown and for the county, dealing with their comprehensive plans. On April 30th, the Shepherdstown Planning Commission is having a meeting to review or to present the review of its comprehensive plan over the past 10 years by a special citizens committee. And that will set the stage for their update that is due by the end of the year for the Shepherdstown Comprehensive Plan. And that'll be at the Shepherdstown Community Club in the War Memorial Building on April 30th. And on May 13th, the Jefferson County Planning Commission will have a public input session to review the future land use map and the action items for its 10-year comprehensive plan update that also is due to be completed by the end of 2024. So 2 meetings for citizens to participate and have their views heard. And so what we thought the Observer is doing tonight is to have some panelists who are expert on comprehensive plan and planning specifically in Jefferson County, or who've been involved with the process, and have them talk about some key issues just to give our readers some insights and some knowledge that they might be able to take to these very important meetings. So our first panelist tonight is Luke Siegfried. He is the county's Jefferson County's planner. And he has been working on updating the Jefferson County Comprehensive Plan for the past year. And our second panelist is Phil Baker-Schenk. And he chaired the Citizens Review Committee of the Shepherdstown Comprehensive Plan. That was about a dozen volunteers, who live both inside and outside of the corporate limits of Shepherdstown. And they spent hundreds of hours over the last year reviewing in great detail the comprehensive plan from 10 years ago, what it achieved, what it didn't achieve, and making recommendations as to what should be done to update it. And they'll be presenting that to the Planning Commission and having a discussion on April 30th. And our third final panelist is Dr. Christine Weimer. She's the president of the Jefferson County Foundation. And that organization is a nonprofit organization that advocates for the quality of life, environmental quality, government transparency on behalf of the citizens of and residents of Jefferson County. And a lot of their focus is on water issues, clean air issues, transportation issues, and so government transparency. So we'll have the 3 of those panelists talk on their respective areas, and then we'll have a Q&A where we'll be taking questions from our audience tonight. And I apologize in advance. There was some, because this is a re-recording of the intro we did for the actual event. There were some technical glitches with our Zoom call, so there may be some areas where it's frozen. And I know in particular at the start, it froze up a little bit. So we'll be joining Mr. Siegfried just after he began. So hopefully we don't miss too much of the introductory comments. But Q&A was quite informative. And the feedback we've had is the panel was very helpful. And so we're going to be recording, we're going to be posting this up on YouTube where you'll, so we can get it to a wider audience. Thank you.
Of Shepherdstown as well as as well as keeping it viable, making sure it has that business income as well as new residents, and say controlling the different aspects that Shepherdstown wants to take part in. So, in keeping with that, I was asked to speak on a few different things, specifically say about the growth development, and I wanted to start off by looking at the new school that is coming in on. I want to make sure on Shepherdstown Pike and on Flowing Springs Road, because that is a huge change to the transportation as well as the development, because you're going to suddenly have a critically for Shepherdstown, the town can own roads. So of course, we're not expecting anyone to jump down to own Shepherdstown Pike or Kearneysville Pike and such. But there's going to be this large change in the traffic pattern south of Shepherdstown. And as Steve mentioned, we are looking at that area very keenly on our future land use map that I'll talk a lot about a little bit later. So that's one of the things I want, to either to have on people's minds as they come out to these input meetings, but also be able to answer any questions that we can about that, because that is a large shift for the town. And speaking of shifts or transportation more broadly, that is what I see as one of the largest challenges for development in Shepherdstown. Because when we did our surveys, we got a number of responses in different input meetings, as well as our two public how it makes getting around Shepherdstown more difficult. And while it's difficult for us to say we want to do this on the comprehensive plan, much like doing anything with, say, the roads, Shepherdstown as a corporation or incorporated municipality has the ability to have a greater sway in that as they both annex different areas and take ownership of roads. But of course, that comes at a significant infrastructure cost. And all these have to be balanced. And that's why I bring it up as one of our key concerns for the development around Shepherdstown. Speaking of which, there are two distinctions I wanted to bring up, because the preferred growth area versus the growth management boundary around Shepherdstown are both a planning tool as well as an annexation tool that are going to be discussed a great deal and are part of the future land use map, which is in turn part of the comprehensive plan updates. Now, the preferred growth area, if you are unaware, is essentially follows the Martinsburg Pike west towards Berkeley County. And that is a number of areas that we already see a lot of growth that is in the unincorporated parts of the county. I'd highlight this as the second thing, that if you were able to come out to these public input meetings, or if you would like to write a letter, is something we very much want to hear about from the citizens about what type of businesses, or more accurately, what type of land use classification should go into these areas. There is a mixture there, what we currently identify as the county, uh, focusing on where we should have suburban residential developments. There's an area where we are looking at mixed use, that would be residential and commercial developments, as well as some general commercial areas, and a few office complexes that we wanted to note down as well. You can find all of this on our website very easily if you go to the Office of Planning and Zoning on the county's website and go to the 2045 Comprehensive Plan Updates. We have a map up there, and I believe the Observer posts it as well. That is still a draft in progress, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about at this May 13th meeting, as well as taking additional public comments as we go along. So two things around, say, Shepherdstown, or excuse me, where the new school is going in, as well as in this preferred growth area around Martinsburg Pike. Really want to hear some public comments on modifications that should be brought up, things that we should keep in mind, so on and so forth. And we've already received a great deal, because in our public surveys, I wanted to bring up a few notes, because I mentioned parking, which is very difficult, because preserving the nature of Shepherdstown makes parking both a necessity as well as a cost, because every time you've got a parking space, that's a little less space that's either someone's home or as a commercial front, and that's a very challenging thing to balance. One of the most positive notes that I really like to bring up was the waterfront opportunities around Shepherdstown. And that is both difficult to develop for various reasons of, say, ownership and all, but it still is a great asset for the community. And I really liked highlighting that and seeing how interested people were in keeping, say, close to the river or having that access. I mentioned this earlier, and this is why I've been holding off on this, is the distinction between the preferred growth area and the urban growth, or I'm sorry, the growth management boundary. The preferred growth area is a place that the county has highlighted to be most conducive for higher intensity developments, and that's why I sprinkled out that area. While the growth management boundary is, as the county views it, an annexation tool that a large swath, both towards the north around Terrapin Neck, all the way down about basically where Shepherdstown Pike or Flowing Springs intersect, there follows a line where that is all identified as the growth management boundary of Shepherdstown. And that will make it very easy for Shepherdstown to annex those areas. Now, of course, annexation is very difficult because, at least from the county perspective, it's all owner initiated. Shepherdstown has tools, very pricey tools, to do larger annexations, but as a county representative, that's not something I am super familiar with. But we see it as a very useful tool to continue to grow Shepherdstown boundaries if it so desires or not, because you have an interesting juxtaposition there, because along the preferred growth area, we identify that as a prime area for Shepherdstown to annex into the future, as that'll have our highest levels of development, both of commercial or suburban residential developments. I didn't really want to take up too much time. I'd love to answer questions as they come up, but I did want to close out with some brief remarks on the comprehensive plan update process. Steve introduced this very well. We are having our final public input meeting on May 13th. However, this is not the last chance you'll have to be able to come in and provide comments, because I take letters and emails all the time, as well as we will have 2 public hearings, one before the Planning Commission in June or July. Those dates are always subject to being moved around as conducive, as well as a public hearing in front of the County Commission. My preference is, as soon as we get comments, the easier it is for us to incorporate those and fully flesh out the ideas. But this is not a closed door. If you miss this input meeting, this is not it. Continue to send in those emails, and I bring them before our Planning Commission to the best of my ability and do our best of, this is why this is important. This is important to the community. And that's really my job as in shepherding this comprehensive plan, is bringing these comments, this local knowledge and care that you all have in your community to fruition. Those are public input things. We've got a, say, longer process of both adoption as well as votes that need to be taken by both the Planning Commission, the County Planning Commission, I should say, as well as the County Commission. Both processes are fairly similar to what Shepherdstown will have to go through on their own, but we've just been handling a slightly different way. Steve, I think I can wrap it up there. It's great talking about Shepherdstown. If you have any questions, that's really what I'm here for.
Yeah, if you have questions, please, I see people are starting to put questions into the chat, and Harriet will be collating those and coordinating them. So let me bring up Phil. There you go. And Phil, are you unmuted?
I'm unmuted, I think, if you can hear me.
Yes. And
Great.
Luke, if you could just turn your video off and mute yourself, you should be able to do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Thanks to you and Harriet for sponsoring this platform tonight. I'm really encouraged by the number of people who have chosen to give us an hour, hour and a half to this topic. Thank you. It's a privilege and honor to be with you in searching through some of these somewhat difficult questions about our future together as a community. Luke, thank you for your work at the county level, and I'm eager to hear your remarks, Dr. Weimer. I'm here. I'm not sure I'm the expert that Steve billed me as. I simply steered a steering committee that was appointed by the town council to look at reviewing the 2014 comprehensive plan of the town and come up with some findings and recommendations, which our committee did on February 26th, and that's available on the website and was in the announcement. And so you can easily download that, check in it. We Are the Observer. It's also on the town site. I believe the dual mission of our steering committee was to review the 2014 recommendations and what the status is of how far along we have gotten as a town in implementing those. And then secondly, recommend updates for the 2024 10-year plan. We had a dozen very active members on that committee from varied professional backgrounds. About half of them reside in Shepherdstown and about half outside the town boundaries. There were several relevant findings in that report relevant to tonight's topic on growth. One, there really are two significantly different and significantly the same communities of interest. They overlap. One community is residents of the town, and the other is residents of surrounding what some people call Greater Shepherdstown. Obviously, only residents of the town elect town government, right? Residents of Greater Shepherdstown are very involved in the town, but don't elect, aren't involved at that level in town political control. Residents of both the town and Greater Shepherdstown, however, do elect county leaders, and more on this in a bit. The second finding of relevance, beyond that there are really two communities of interest here, town and Greater Shepherdstown. The second finding of relevance, I think, is that county decisions on growth, much as Luke just walked us through, directly shape the approaches into town, the gateways into town. What people see first when they come toward Shepherdstown is county-governed land use. Growth in that area of Greater Shepherdstown, or within that growth management boundary that was described earlier, growth there that does not involve town and county close cooperation can have dramatically negative impacts on the community character of both the town and the county. I don't mean to disparage some other community, but I guess that's what I'm about to do. Many of you, perhaps like I, have visited Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and the run up to that bucolic, historic, sacred, hallowed ground is rather unnerving. That happened because folks weren't in charge of the growth and controlling the character of the community and the approach to that landmark. The focus here on the 24 steering committee's report priority recommendations that are most relevant to the county facing issues are as follows, in my view. To preserve and protect economic development and tourism that is at the heart of Shepherdstown's economy, and to preserve and protect our historical character, the land use that feeds and enhances that character, and the character of our community itself. Shepherdstown, by most measures, is one of the crown jewels of the county. The county's economy, the county's, we're perched within easy reach of a huge demographic market. We don't often think about that, but the fact is that the restaurants, the culture that we enjoy here as local residents is in many ways subsidized by the out-of-town guests who also bring money in and help make that possible. So we're within reach of a very wealthy demographic market. We have very unique, hard to replicate historical assets, Civil War sites, etc. We have, as mentioned earlier, a very unique recreational asset, the river, the towpath. We have a unique university resource, unparalleled in the county and in the Panhandle. That brings us cultural enrichment and activity like CATF and many others. And one that I want us to focus on tonight is we have a very unique town run that runs through the town. How many towns have that kind of feature? So how do we preserve and protect what makes Shepherdstown unique, what draws most of us to love and cherish this town as our home community, as the epicenter of our life? How do we preserve and protect that? It would be, you would think, logically in the interest of the town and the county to strive together to make all land use activities, all land use decisions within this growth management boundary that surrounds the town, make all of that compatible with the character of the town. It's certainly in the town's interest to carefully, judiciously, and I would make a strong argument for strategically persuading key landowners in surrounding growth management boundary areas to agree to manage their land use and any growth that occurs in ways that are compatible with the town's character. And that would be especially acutely important with respect to landowners located along the roadways and the waterways leading into town. Some measures that could be encouraged, and our steering committee recommended this in our land use recommendations and findings, are an active, voluntary, and strategic use of conservation measures, battlefield easements, as well as, mentioned earlier, annexation. And these measures could include intermodal transportation systems that dampen vehicle traffic and prioritize walkways, bike paths within greater Shepherdstown, kind of the spoke and wheel effect into and out of town. And make sure that all growth or land use decisions within greater Shepherdstown, within the larger growth management boundary area, strengthen the downtown core of town and don't foster a donut-like development circle that ends up hollowing out the town in future years. These are just some of the many, many relevant priorities for the next 10 years that our review committee recommended be adopted, given serious consideration to. And the question for each of us tonight, I think, is, will we allow town decisions to occur? Will we allow county decisions to occur that end up fouling this one-of-a-kind nest that we so cherish, Shepherdstown and its community character? Or will we insist that all decisions preserve and protect the town and community character that we all cherish? It's going to take a lot of vigilance. I'm delighted that there's around 60 folks on this call tonight. Encourage you to do as was urged, attend the public hearing on April 30th, where we'll go into a little more depth on the recommendations. And I am really excited that a lot of the committee members are going to be able to be part of that presentation. And a lot of questions and answers, I think, will be helpful as we together try to illuminate our path forward. I do encourage folks to actually read. It takes a couple hours, so settle in. But read the 2024 review report. 12 of us really labored over trying to make it relevant and practical and accessible. You have to read it alongside the 2014 comprehensive plan to fully grasp some of the concepts. And then, as important as reading it and familiarizing yourself with it, we need each of us to actively commit ourselves to actively working with the town's elected leadership in the coming year to refine and implement these recommendations into our plan for the next 10 years. Because in the final analysis, what is a good plan if no good comes from it? And it was that question that led our committee to recommend several things to ensure that the next 10-year plan is taken more seriously than the 2014 plan was taken. That's why we recommended the adoption of specific governance structures that would help hold town officials now and in the future accountable to the comprehensive plan goals that have emerged, bubbled up from the residents of the town and surrounding areas. And that's why our 2024 report recommended that residents of the town and residents of Greater Shepherdstown actively work with county leaders and insist that our town leadership and our county leadership work healthily together on intergovernmental coordination and cooperation. After all, if the county allows growth surrounding Shepherdstown that ends up snuffing out what is unique about Shepherdstown, the county itself will lose one of its crown jewels that really does undergird the county's tourism-based economy. So with that, I'm happy to hand it back to you, Steve. I hope that inspires some questions and thinking, and I'm really looking forward to the public hearing that the Town Council and Planning Commission have called for next week, April 30, from 5 to 7 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Phil. And as you were talking about getting together to read this thing, I was thinking that would be a wonderful thing to get a group of people in, like, maybe one of the local pubs to silently read this all together. So Dr. Christine Weimer is going to join us now and give us the perspective of the Jefferson County Foundation, because she has been looking at growth in Jefferson County from above and below and all around for the past several years.
Thanks so much, Steve. Steve, would you mind giving me permission to share my screen? While we're doing that, so I really appreciate Steve inviting me, the Observer inviting me this evening. And I hope to bring the really engaged citizen perspective to this conversation as soon as I can get my slides to share. Were you able to enable it, Steve? Yes, okay, great. And apologize for the messiness. Okay. So as Steve said, I'm the president of Jefferson County Foundation. Jefferson County Foundation, we're a 501c3, first founded in 2016. We support and promote effective and accountable government. Sustainable development, equity, protection of health, heritage, and the environment in Jefferson County. So I'd like to talk about the critical importance of natural resources in the comprehensive plans and zoning, and then some quick lessons learned about both the interplay between comprehensive plans and zoning and the need to get involved early. Natural resources are really important, and they're important across the county and municipalities, because obviously natural resources know no bounds. And neither does infrastructure. And infrastructure really has an interplay with natural resources. And when I say natural resources, one of the most important things to consider on the local level that has a lasting impact is water. And so I'd like to kind of concentrate on water. And so first I'd like to address water quality considerations. So there's really kind of 4 things to keep in mind as a citizen when you're advocating at the comprehensive plan level and the zoning level in Jefferson County. So groundwater is highly affected by surface water in Jefferson County, and surface water is highly affected by groundwater in Jefferson County. So they really affect each other. And groundwater travels quickly in Jefferson County in conduits. So it travels rapidly compared to groundwater in non-karst areas. And groundwater contamination is really hard to impossible to remediate. So you really want to prevent it in sensitive areas rather than try to remediate it. So I just want to say right off the bat that I am not a water expert, but the foundation works and collaborates with several both karst hydrogeology experts and engineers. This map is kind of a loose map. Oh, I say loose because these are bubbles, right? They're not exact, but this is a map of the watersheds that the foundation monitors in northern Jefferson County. So you can see Shepherdstown over here, and this is the town run. And then over here, we have Hopewell, Shaw, Rocky Marsh, the town run again, Rattlesnake Run, and Elks Branch. There's Elks Run over here. Notice that's not highlighted. We don't actually monitor it, and I'll get to why in a minute. So just as a reminder, I'm going to stay pretty high level here, but I just want to remind you why this is so important. These are 2 maps. This is a map from the GIS website. This is a map from the water study in 2012 conducted by the for the county commission. And here you can see on both of these maps the water that moves in the county. In this northern area around Shepherdstown, most of the water is moving north. And then there's this area here in the middle of the county that's devoid of surface water streams. This area is devoid of surface water streams because the ground here is so highly porous that surface water just goes into the groundwater immediately. And then it travels out from that area and comes out in these streams out here at springs. So we'll kind of get to that more in a minute. And you can see the same thing on this map over here. I included this map so you kind of be oriented by the roads that are overlain, even though it's a bit harder to see the streams. And here we have kind of a close-up version of this map. And this is Shepherdstown. This is the town run, which is very important to you. And then this is Rocky Marsh, which is also very important to you as your backup water source. These little blue dots are all springs. And if you look at this closely and say, hey, the spring in my backyard is not on here, there are quite a few springs that are not on here. And then again, you see this upland area here that's heavily karstified, very porous. That means it's very porous. And the surface water them in this map. And if we zoom in to the northern portion closest to Shepherdstown, Shepherdstown is here. And this study was done by the USGS. The contaminants, in this case dye, that is in this upland area affects all 5 of these watersheds, including here, the town run, and here, Rocky Marsh. And in fact, it happened quite quickly. We know that the dye went from this location, this injection site, 4.5 miles into Rocky Marsh Run in less than 2 weeks. And so if you know anything about groundwater in non-karst areas, you know that that is really quick. And so we know that surface water not only affects groundwater quality, but it does so quite quickly, and from far outside of Shepherdstown. So here, this is a similar map. This one's in color, and I thought that it might be easier for people to see. So here is Shepherdstown. Over here is Shenandoah Junction. The new highway is not on this map, but here's Fox Glen, if you know where that is, and then here's Carneysville. And this is, again, that injection site, and it went to all 5 of these watersheds. Not every spring was monitored. That would be over, dozens of springs. And so, but these 5 that were monitored were positive. And so in this way, you can see that the surface water here affects, or the groundwater in this area affects the surface water, and the surface in this water in this area affects the groundwater. This injection was done through a sinkhole. So they just put surface water with the dye in it through the sinkhole. And that is how a lot of surface water gets into the groundwater. And this is a map. It's just a heat map to remind us that Jefferson County has a lot of sinkholes. Sinkholes are direct conduits from surface water to groundwater. And these particular areas around Shepherdstown are both highly karstified and have high risk for sinkhole development. And so just to recap, we want to pay attention to what happens on the surface through development, because surface water, like stormwater runoff, affects groundwater rapidly, and that groundwater affects surface water rapidly, even from well outside the area. And once that groundwater is contaminated, it's very difficult to impossible to remediate. Next, I'd like to talk about water availability considerations. So again, I told you that Jefferson County Foundation monitors these 6 watersheds, and I said that we don't monitor Elks Run, and that's because the headwaters of Elks Run are dry, and they have been that way for a while, which is concerning. I'll jump back to this map and I'll point out Elks Run. So you guys can see my cursor, right? Can someone let me know? This is Elks Run here. That's coming up from the branch of Elks Branch and Elks Run. Is that a yes? I can't see the chat, but
Yes, we can see
Okay.
your cursor.
thank you. So this is the headwaters here of Elks Run, and it's on Gap View Farm, and so there are 2 springs there, and those springs have been dry for quite some time. In the late 2010s, there is a well here in Fox Glen. It's been there for a very long time, and it's one of the highest producing wells in Jefferson County. That well was acquired by a much larger utility, Jefferson Utility Inc., and that utility was incorporated into Jefferson Utility Inc. Into their system. They put in a water tower out at this location here, and that water is used with their system to service Rockwool, which is across the street over here. Since that time, there has not been water that we could sample from these springs over here. And Elks Branch is essentially dry. It's not wet enough when it rains, water lays in it, but it's essentially dry. There's not enough water in it for us to monitor, put in our monitoring systems, or to sample. And so this concerns us, because if this watershed is going dry, what does that tells us? That our aquifer is going down, and by tells us, I mean that's what the karst hydrogeologists tell us. Even more concerning, these 3 not these 3, but 3 springs in this area of Rattlesnake Run have been dry now for over 12 months. That has not happened in more than 69 years. So for the last 68 years, every year they would give water for a certain portion of the year. They have now been dry for more than 12 months. And so that is very concerning, because one could say, well, we're just in a dry spell, and so these springs are low, but it hasn't happened in 69 years, and we've had dry spells in 69 years. And so we want to think about when we're planning for development, we want to plan for water use. And, there is a large utility in this middle portion of the county that's a private utility. It's now American Water, that uses groundwater for servicing its customers. And we want to make sure that there's enough groundwater left over for farming, agriculture, and other businesses. And so we need to be thinking about, how are we going to supply water to new development? And how are we going to do that responsibly and sustainably? And I apologize, there's a zoomed in version of those two. I forgot I had that in there. Apologize. So just to recap about water availability, the last groundwater survey in Jefferson County was done over 10 years ago in 2012. And as Steve was indicating earlier, the development has really ramped up since then. And a lot more, both businesses like Rockwool and houses, have been added to that, to the draw from the groundwater. And then also there's a private utility that's now utilizing that for both industrial and residential commercials, or customers, not commercials. So I want to take the last few minutes, about 5 minutes of my time here, and just give a few examples about the interplay, where it's important for residents and citizens, the interplay of zoning and comprehensive plans, and to really understand that and drill down the importance of the comprehensive plan. So my first example is with Ranson. So Ranson recently finished their comprehensive plan, and this is Ranson, their most recent comprehensive plan. This is Ranson on the left here, and you'll remember that Ranson is kind of a funny shape because it has a shoestring annexation out here near Carneysville. And you may remember that this is where there was quite a bit of discussion about rezoning for Rockwool. I'm not going to discuss that now, but that's where this is. Before Ranson started redoing its comprehensive plan, the owners of this portion of land over here sought to have the zoning changed to be industrial, to be the same as Rockwool or similar. And that did not go through because it did not align with the comprehensive plan. And so that's very important. The comprehensive plan, while it's not law, it's policy, it is critical because the zoning is based on the comprehensive plan. And I just want to show you where that aligns on the map over here. So this part of Ranson is over here on this map, just so you can see where that is on the water map that we've been looking at. And again, it's kind of in this area of this map. So an area of, we would call, sensitive environment for groundwater quality. And so previously that area was zoned new community, as you can see in this map over here. And in the future land use map, Ranson wanted to designate that area as large parcel mixed use. The definition of large parcel mixed use included zones that were light industrial. Unfortunately, Ranson did not have a zone that is called light industrial. You can see over here, they just have industrial. And so Ranson actually needed to put approving their comprehensive plan on hold so that they could approve a new zoning ordinance that further defined industrial zoning so that they could limit the use of this land to light industrial zoning. And that's really critical, because if the comprehensive plan calls for something and that zoning doesn't exist, it's really hard to make that happen or make the two work together, and they must work together. So Ranson did that. They stopped the process. They passed the new zoning ordinance, and then they were able to pass their comprehensive plan, further protecting this land. Does still allow industrial development, but not heavy industrial development. The next example is Harvest Hills. So this is in the county. And just to orient you, up is not north in this. It's kind of north, but this is Duffield's train station over here. And this is Flowing Springs over here. and the high school is off the page there. And so there are a few houses you're probably familiar with here on the left-hand side of the road as you go from Duffields to the high school before the 90-degree turn. And Arcadia Land that owns this land, they have a conditional use permit because this land is zoned rural. And so they have a conditional use permit to put low density housing here. But the market has changed and they decided they wanted to change their zoning and to allow them to have more houses in this area. So they sought a zoning change. Unfortunately, this land, or in the county zoning code, there's only one purely residential zone, and that's residential growth. And while they were seeking to put in 1,000 houses, residential growth allows urban level housing and would have allowed them to put even more houses there. Which seem, to the planning commission, didn't seem appropriate because this land is surrounded by land that is zoned rural. And there haven't been any changes in the area there. And so this actually was not approved either. It was actually withdrawn, but at the planning commission level, it was not recommended because it didn't align with the comprehensive plan. Because in the comprehensive plan, I know it's small, but this is the area that I'm circling here. You can kind of tell because of that curvature of the yellow. So this is the subject land here, and it's in yellow. And if we look over here, that's low density residential. And so the comprehensive plan said that this was meant to be low density housing. And the concern was that if it was switched to residential growth, there could be far more than low density housing there. And because the two didn't align, this wasn't recommended and ended up being withdrawn from consideration. And so this is an example of where it's really important that, that the alignment of the comprehensive plan and the zoning request aligned. And in this case, they didn't, and shows how important getting the comprehensive plan right is. And so the last example is Jefferson Orchards. And this is a little, I said Jefferson Orchards because they own this land. That company, this is a land holding company, Jefferson Orchards Inc. I should have been more complete here. But they own this land. Rockwell is kind of below this land to orient you. This is Carneysville here. This is the Shepherdstown Pike here. This is 480. And this is Route 9. And this is the Horatio Gates farm here. So, and this is Warm Springs Road over here. So if you're oriented, they have recently applied, they previously applied in 2021 to have the zoning of this land changed from rural to urban growth, or to residential growth, excuse me, which allows high density housing or higher density housing, similar to the previous piece of land that we were talking about. In this case, this was approved. And you might say to yourself, why was it approved if it's mostly surrounded by residential land or rural land, excuse me. And in this case, they found that there had been a change in the community. And that change was that Rockwell was built nearby. And Rockwell brought in utilities like sewer, water, and gas into the area. And that constituted a change that hadn't been predicted when the comprehensive plan had been approved last. And so this land could be changed to residential growth. So now the landowner is applying to build about 700 housing units in this area. And recently, quite a few people have been concerned or exercised online, you might have seen. But the thing is that the zoning in this area has already been changed. And so while people who are interested in doing so can oppose variances or can make comment on the plan, really the zoning here has been changed. And this example highlights why it is so important to get involved early, and also the importance of changes in the neighborhood. So you may think, oh, one small change, okay, that's not gonna be too bad. But when things change, it can be a snowball effect, because that's a trigger in the West Virginia law for further zoning change that doesn't seem to align with the comprehensive plan. if a neighborhood changes character. And that's what happened in this case. And so the plan will be at the planning commission soon. But the zoning has already been changed. And I apologize, this is just more of the site map. So this is how those 700 houses will fit in that relatively small area. And then the last thing I just want to bring up was that kind of brings us to the Shepherdstown Elementary School example that one of my colleagues here brought up earlier. And, the Shepherdstown Elementary School may seem like one thing, there's just one thing there. But one change like Rockwool can change the character of a neighborhood and can draw more development into that area that may not have been foreseen on the comprehensive plan because it changes the character of the neighborhood. So it's something to think about and look out for when advocating for both the town and county comprehensive plans. So I hope that was helpful, and I apologize, Steve, to go over a little bit there. But I hope those examples were.
No word, that was very great detailed information, and I think we'll cycle back to some of that during the Q&A. So I'm going to bring back Luke and Phil, or if they can bring themselves back. There we go. Gentlemen, are you both unmuted? Bill, can you talk?
I think I can be heard.
All
Yes.
right. And I guess I should bring myself back on, so I'm not just this disembodied voice. But let's, while I'm searching for myself in this long list, we have about 65 people, so it's actually pretty good here. Harriet, if you can find me and bring me back in, that would be great. Thank you. So, let's start with, we got a lot of questions. So let's start with some of the, what may be easier ones, more procedural. And I think this really goes to Phil. What is the schedule for updating the Shepherdstown Comprehensive Plan?
Sure. That'll be up to the town council and the planning commission of the town. But I'm told the current thinking is that by the end of 24, which is quickly upon us, the town has a plan to either adopt the review report that I was describing of our steering committee as an amended plan, or refine it, revise it. There's some talk, I haven't heard a decision yet. And people should ask that question on April 30th, actually, of the town council and planning commission. There's some talk of hiring a consultant firm to do another report updating the 2014. So whichever, we feel like our steering committee will either inform that update or serve as the basis of the update.
And that's a good segue into the next question. Where is this April 30th meeting, and what's going to happen there? And where can people find out about that?
I can answer the first part of your question, and really everybody on this Zoom meeting will be the answer to what happens. It's from 5 to 7 on the 30th in the second floor of the community club War Memorial Building. And it's a special hearing of the Planning Commission, a public hearing. And the role of my committee, steering committee, is simply to present an oral summary of our report. And at that point, it's up to the Planning Commission. I know they want to hear public comment. They may want to discuss the various recommendations, both procedural and substantive, that are in our report.
Okay, thank you. So now a little bit more expansive, no pun intended. So this is addressed to Luke. How does the Jefferson County Comprehensive Plan recognize Greater Shepherdstown? I mean, you mentioned the growth management boundary is kind of a line on the map, but there's a lot of words and other ideas and concepts in the comprehensive plan. Is this sort of greater Shepherdstown referenced anywhere else in the document?
The short answer is no. I came across the term for Greater Shepherdstown. I mean, a lot of people feel it because you can feel the people who associate this is the center of this community. And sure, the town boundaries are in a specific place, but everyone in a fairly close proximity feel as part of Shepherdstown and such. So, is it written in the comprehensive plan? The current one, not to my knowledge. Will it be incorporated in the next? Potentially as a reference to the preferred growth area as well as the growth management boundary there. However, the first time I heard the term was when I was going through the report that was put together. I did actually read that today, was there. And I think it's a very fitting term, but as of this point, it is not, say, defined. We just look at, say, those lines on the map is one way to put it, but that is how it is described in the comprehensive plan, is that growth management boundary, and to a greater extent, I would identify, say, the preferred growth area, which defines part. I would not say you actually have to be part of the preferred growth area to be part of the greater Shepherdstown area. I think that's a much larger concept.
Yeah, I think, in the context, I mean, the line between Shepherdstown can extend east almost all the way to, Bakerton, to the west, almost to the Berkeley County line. And in fact, there are some people who live in Berkeley County who have a Shepherdstown zip code, and they feel that they're part of Shepherdstown, and all the way down to Carneysville. I mean, if it predates my time, but Chrissy might remember, students from Carneysville went to Shepherdstown Middle and Shepherdstown High School. So Shepherdstown really does spread wide, and a lot of our key assets are outside of the town boundaries. Morgan's Grove Park, big park outside, and some of them are more recent. They've left town. The volunteer fire department, moved outside of town, about a decade and a half ago. The library has left town. The elementary school is leaving town. So, I think, Phil, you mentioned the concept of a donut, where essential services attributes leave town. So, Luke, in the terms of the comprehensive plan, there's these concepts of villages, right? And these, how does that, is Shepherdstown considered one of these village areas, or is it different from like the Carneysville or the Middleway or the Summit Point village areas?
Shepherdstown is not a village. It is a incorporated municipality. The villages are, as you mentioned, scattered throughout the county, but Shepherdstown is its own entity, essentially. But the extension of that is the greater Shepherdstown area, as we've been calling it, is also not a village. It's not the case right now. I think it's the best way to summarize it.
Okay. So we had a few questions related to the growth management boundary, the preferred growth, and some of them related to annexation. And I think everyone who spoke here said, really they're not an expert on annexations. I'm going to suggest that we're going to refer those questions over to the April 30th meeting, because my understanding, the county doesn't initiate annexations. That would be more of a question to address to the elected officials in Shepherdstown. Okay, so, but I think, look, if you could just re-summarize the preferred growth, is it preferred growth boundary or preferred growth area? I'm not sure I got the term right. And
It's
the
a preferred growth area, and
Okay.
then the growth management boundary.
Right. And so you started to mention specific businesses, and then you changed a little bit slightly that it's really what the land use map talks about, types of businesses. But is it possible to designate, or either in land use or in zoning, specific types of businesses, or is it more general than that? in a preferred growth area?
It is more general than that. So if you it is say generally supported, as Chrissy was mentioning earlier. So in terms of say specific businesses, no, it is far more general than that, and it depends on both the zoning district that the owner applies for, because say general commercial might be your broadest for say commercial uses, but there are other districts, say is your residential light industrial commercial is the broadest when zoning. I think it was like the was one of the first zoning districts brought into. That is your absolute widest, and that's something we're trying to move away from, which is when you look at, actually as an example of this, in the future land use map, we do not identify any area as residential, light industrial, commercial. We try to steer towards a residential commercial, which is what we've identified a lot of the preferred growth area, as well as a mixed use in that preferred growth area outside of Shepherdstown, because we do not believe it is a good idea to bring in light industrial applications outside of Shepherdstown. We're trying to avoid that. And that is one of the tools we do use, that is a future land use map, is to avoid potential rezonings to allow, say, light industrial or industrial uses.
So in the interplay between the land use map and the zoning and you know, on the commercial industrial side, there's more variations in zoning than there are in residential currently. But we've seen, yeah, and I think, you know, Chrissy was mentioning, you know, where there's changes of a material nature to environment or the area. Do you envision in this preferred growth area, you know, if it says for, you know, commercial, that there could be changes that would then allow rezoning to light industrial, or is that area? It's hard to, you know, it's not to have a crystal ball here, but you know, give us
Sure, no, this is a great way to actually work off of the changes that Chrissy brought up really well. So to quote from a state code here, you can make those changes, which happen in some cases, if there's been, I swear at it, major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature within an area that were not anticipated by the comprehensive plan. It's that non-anticipated part, which I think is why Chrissy's smiling about this, because
I'm
we have
smiling because I didn't take the time to read it. I'm glad you did. So
can expand their lines as well as the infrastructure and both say the road infrastructure. We have a pretty good idea of that. So with that in mind, we crafted the future land use map classifications to go, okay, we think it's appropriate here to have higher intensity development, or in a lot of cases, this should just remain rural residential is one of other classifications that we utilize to go, this is a neighborhood, it's not appropriate here to suddenly throw up a gas station, for example. Those are anticipated. And so, no, I do not believe at this time that we would anticipate any changes to bring in light industrial or what have you, because we've got a good idea. So it isn't anticipated, and they are not classified in the future or in the comprehensive plan and the future land use map.
Steve, I want to break in.
Go ahead.
If I can, just to circle back to something Dr. Weimer said, which is beware of the domino effect here. Okay. That preferred development area is going to be the heart of the easiest path toward explosive growth. And it will ripple out from that current preferred growth area so that in 10 years from now, there will be a new preferred growth area on the land use maps. This is the way growth happens. You saw that with Rockwool. You see how the developers and county zoning decisions and approvals are premised on what's the easiest path of least resistance to saying yes. I mean, that's the question. It's not that they always say yes, but that's the way a policymaker looks at it. And so the fact that on the land use plan to the west of town right now, we have a county controlled area called preferred growth is indicative of the future. The only question is how quickly. And every decision affirmatively leads to a quicker decision if the economy stays the way it is. You know, that's really the way I think these decisions are made. And for a town's interest, and I still submit it's really the county's interest as well. They want a healthy, vibrant Shepherdstown town. They don't want to snuff out this jewel. If they do, they're silly. It's in their self-interest to have a shiny town on the river that's attracting outside money. And the way they do that is to cooperatively work very closely with the town leadership on what, if any, kind of growth happens in that preferred growth area. We had an example. I was not privy to it. Some people I know and trust were. We had this Rumsey Green development idea in that very area, which did not come to fruition. And with respect to one landowner, Rocks, I understand that they cooperated with the town in designing the look and feel of the Rocks corner store and gas station. Their competitor did not. And if you look at them, you can see which one looks a little more like Shepherdstown and which one looks like Gettysburg. So I think the message I would bring to the county from the town's standpoint is let's work together on this sensitive area that has been labeled preferred growth. And let's be very deliberate and collaborative about it. And the town's voice should not be limited to, well, if you really want to control it, then annex it. It really needs to be some middle ground somewhere in between, because annexation is sometimes costly and sometimes very cross-cutting. As I said, it needs to be strategically pursued, but only strategically.
And so I'll use, Phil, I'll use that as a segue to pose a question to Luke. And Luke, again, I know you've been in the role for about a year, so feel free to punt it back to, a question to raise at the May 13th meeting. But when the 2014 comprehensive plan was crafted, the county's plan, and they introduced the preferred growth area. It's sort of, I guess that it sort of implied a working relationship between the county and the town to, collaborate on that. But I don't know that has been a very, well, evenly, matched, process. What are the mechanisms for the town to engage with the county in a way that's compliant with state law and the county's obligations under the zoning ordinance? Do you have anything that you feel free you can discuss at this point?
Sure, I can speak to a few mechanisms. I cannot speak to whether or not, as I'm not the zoning administrator, I don't believe that might actually have to be a larger question about whether there are formal mechanisms in either a zoning ordinance or a subdivision regulations about obligatory connections. As it so happens, when I was going through the report put together for Shepherdstown's comprehensive plan update, I was looking through, and without getting too technical, there is a way for us to bring together actually a hard-baked-in form where an applicant on a development within the GMB would actually have to provide notification to Shepherdstown staff. That's not in anywhere right now, but it's going to be in our comprehensive plan as one of our action items, because in a lot of our surveys, we actually have gotten a lot of feedback about how they view the GMB, how Shepherdstown wants to actually be more collaborative in this. And that, again, is a large problem that we might have with state code, because some of the planning tools that might exist in other states do not, or exist in different forms in West Virginia. Now, in terms not hard baked into our regulations and ordinances, at least on a staff level, I speak with Andy Beal and some notifications when we have planning commission meetings come up fairly often, as Andy Beal is the professional planning and zoning administrator for Shepherdstown. I also have those connections with some of my counterparts in Ranson and Charlestown as well, as examples. And to my knowledge, obviously, I'm not really privy to these meetings whatsoever, but there is mayoral meetings between, I believe, the president of the county commission, as well as all mayors of the 5 municipalities. So that's, of course, an elected connection between our bodies, not a staff one. This is the only staff one I can speak to, because that's what I'm actually party to. But that would be that degree of collaboration that we currently have.
Okay. Citizen engagement and pushing.
I think, Steve, I think
I
you were
broke up.
We didn't hear what you
You-
said. You were frozen.
We did not hear what you said, Steve.
Okay.
Can you start from the
Does
top?
it require a diligent level of citizen engagement and pushing on the town side and on the county side to make sure that, I mean, what Luke said sounds like, well, that sounds like it should work, but does it and will it? And how do we make sure that it does? I was just asking for you to opine on, based on what you'd seen, in reviewing the what happened with the last comprehensive plan in Shepherdstown. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, are you asking Phil or myself?
Phil, I was asking Phil.
I thought you were asking Luke. Happy
No.
to talk. Yeah, I'm heartened, Luke, to hear you talk about that, because it is frustrating for a town to feel like we're doing in isolation of the county our comprehensive plan, when so much of what we want and are trying to do is affected by county processes. And so I'm glad you read our little review report. I hope there can be, it just would make a lot of conceptual sense to have a coherent crosswalk between the county comp plan and each town's comp plan, because so much affects the other. And I still argue there's common interests. There really are. And so encouraging anytime there is a growth or impacting a decision, proposal, application, idea that's of relevance within a growth management boundary of a particular town, like Shepherdstown, having there be immediate communication and consultation would really be beneficial, and that ought to be, in my view, structured and something that's reliable from week to week, month to month, year to year. And I'm glad you raised it, Luke. I think that kind of cooperation has been lacking for whatever reasons. I can't tell you, but it's one of the things we found to be the case, that there was a heck of a lot of aspiration within the 2014 town plan, comp plan, about things happening outside of town. And there was homage paid to the importance of intergovernmental coordination, but we really couldn't find any evidence that there was much of that occurring. And we think that that's a structural weakness of governance that is as important as are all the other lofty substantive policy issues in the plan, because a good plan isn't worth anything if it doesn't come to good.
So speaking of a good plan and anticipating that we've got a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks with the county, what types of comments and are going to be most effective in shaping the comprehensive plan, that at the next meeting, the future land use map and the goals? What can citizens really hone in on to make this session effective in the way that you can adjust this plan? This one's to Luke, obviously.
Short answer, I definitely appreciate, say, the very practical and the very, say, pointed. This area should be identified in this way, or this policy should be implemented in this way because it's beneficial for this reason. That sounds super concise. It's very difficult because a lot of the things we talk about are either circumstantial or a very big picture, and that is the point of the comprehensive plan. But one of our goals and directives for drafting this plan is it should be far more focused than prior plans and be very implementable. So when and this will be part of our May 13th meeting, is the opportunity to, if you believe that there is an action item missing, please write it out. I am happy to take it. I've already gotten various different letters or emails, I should say, and we take those to heart. I read them all and incorporate those that I can, as well as pass them along and include them to our planning commission packets. I know we're running a little bit short on time here, so I did want to take the opportunity for this meeting on May 13th. It's very easy to remember. May 12th is Mother's Day. Our final public input meeting is on the 13th, so you can go link them all together. It's from 7 to 9 at Jefferson High School, 7 to 9 p.m. at Jefferson High School. And then the following day is your primary election on May 14th. So a lot of stuff happening in a 3-day period. Don't forget.
Yeah. Well, we actually still have a few more minutes here, because I don't have to put any money in the meters because this is not parking in Shepherdstown. This is online. You talked, Luke, about the new school going in off of Flowing Springs Road, and Chrissy, you mentioned this too for different reasons. Luke, you talked about it changes traffic patterns, and Chrissy, I think you were alluding to that it's a change, and perhaps I think what you were talking about is that a school building houses next to school that allows your children walking to school is a good thing. So the school system, however, it's my understanding they're exempt from some of the regulations that a private developer would have in terms of zoning as to where they site these schools. So this school is really at the very southern edge of the growth management boundary. So first to Luke, what do you mean when you're saying traffic patterns changing? Driven by
I don't think I'm saying anything revolutionary to say that intersection of Shepherdstown Pike and Flowing Springs is difficult, and I'm forgetting the other crossroad. That's
Gardner
already,
Lane. Yeah.
Thank you, Gardner's Lane. That is already a very tricky place to negotiate with school buses and students being dropped off or picked up or what have you. That is going to change the traffic in that area. That's what I was getting at from there.
Okay.
So we've already identified that as a problem area prior to the introduction to the school, but that's all I was meaning by that is it's going to change traffic patterns because it is this very impactful development, because that's what a school is.
Right. But Chrissy, I think because this question came up, it's not just water. And so when we talk about infrastructure, like you build a new road, okay, you can put houses on it. You have water, now you can increase the density of housing there. Does the schools act in the same way, even though there's no changes to anything else, but the fact that there's a school there allows someone to come in and say, well, there's been a unanticipated change or significant change to the area?
So I don't know that I have the expertise to say, or the decision-making power, because really it would be, you know, a governing body that would decide whether they believe there has been a change. And that's when the decision's made. It's not like a better description in the law. I mean, Luke read the whole thing. But I mean, I guess I was just kind of bringing it forward as we make these changes, like putting a school there. You know, does it change the character of the community? I would advocate no, others might advocate yes. But it's an important thing to recognize and think about. In this case, this comprehensive plan certainly knew that school was going to go there. But somebody in the future, as more things happen with the school, maybe the road gets upgraded, a traffic circle gets put in, a traffic light, something like that. You know, maybe there's a little bit more infrastructure that goes in. Someone might advocate for that constituting a change. And so
Okay.
those are the kind of things I'm advocating for the public to have their eye out and think about, you know, because one thing that seems small might not be small in the end. So
Okay.
that was my point.
Well, I think we are getting close to the end of our time here, so I just wanted to wrap it up by thanking all of our panelists. Luke, your meeting, your planning commission meeting is on May the 3rd, as you said. The website is Jefferson County.
May 13th.
May 13th, right. JeffersonCountyWV.org. Under the planning and zoning, or you can go to Observer WV and the Jefferson County Comp Plan pages on our website has links back to their website. That link was in the email we sent out for this. Chrissy, JeffersonCountyFoundation.org is your website.
Yep.
If people are interested, and when we send out the follow-up notes, we'll post that information. And Phil, there's a link to the comprehensive plan for Shepherdstown on the shepherdstown.us website, and also again, Observer WV, Shepherdstown Comp Plan 2024. It's up there. I want to thank you all for participating, and our plan is to we did record this. We'll see how well it turned out. We'll put this up on a YouTube channel. And we'll send out a follow-up note to all of the participants. And there were a lot of other specific questions that, since Luke said he liked very specific questions, I'm going to give all these to him. And, you know, put post-it notes. So when you walk in on May 13th, there'll already be notes already on some of these maps. So any final words from any of our panelists?
I just want to thank you, Steve, and the Observer, Harriet, for providing this platform. And most especially, I want to thank everyone who participated tonight. Thanks for your chat comments. We'll take them to heart. And I hope to see everyone at the April 30th meeting, that special meeting of the Planning Commission of the town, and our public hearing. It'd be great to have your involvement actively in that.
Yeah, and I wanted to give a shout out to all the people who attended, because we got up to 65 and we're still at 55. So we kept everyone's attention, but it's tough material. But it's important because, as Chrissy said, you know, it's iterative. Every little step you know, makes a difference. So thank you all, and with that, I guess I'll say goodnight.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.